Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to continue our WrestleMania series, this time working on WrestleMania 15, which took place on March 28th, 1999, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the First Union Center. They announced attendance for this WrestleMania was 20,276, so slightly higher than they have been over the last uh, 7 or 8. The tagline for this WrestleMania was the Raging Climax. So that just is the tip of the iceberg kind of myth for WrestleMania 15. We also talked about WrestleMania 14 being the first Attitude Era Mania, and to an extent, I would agree with that. But if WrestleMania 14 was an Attitude Era Mania, then that was the kiddie pool version, and this Mania is the deep end because we go hard in the Attitude Era in this Mania, and yeah, tons of just what did I just watch moments, and we'll get in, of course, to each and every one of those. If you have any motion sickness, now would be the time to go ahead and take that Dramamine because this roller coaster of a Mania has a little bit of everything. So, with that, let's go ahead and get right into it and get into the first match to kick off the show for this WrestleMania, which is Hardcore Holly going up against Billy Gunn and Al Snow in a triple threat hardcore championship match. Um, this one feels like something's out of place. That's because it is in just a few weeks before this Mania, a month before exactly, Billy Gunn was the Intercontinental Championship and Road Dogg was the Hardcore Champion. A few hot potatoes later, they've now swapped those titles. And Road Dogg is now the IC title, and Billy Gunn is in the hardcore match, which makes a lot more sense because the weeks leading up to Mania, they had been building these feuds. And so now both guys are in the opposite matches, and the stories they have been telling kind of went on deaf ears. So, yeah, just one of the many question marks for WrestleMania 15, but that was the first one because Billy Gunn does feel out of place. Road Dogg would have made a lot more sense, I think you could argue. So, with all that being said, KP, what'd you think of this opening contest of WrestleMania 15?
Yeah, the title switches were a little bit weird going into this one. They mentioned it a couple of times on commentary throughout this match and through Road Dogg match that we'll talk about, in much more detail later on. But yeah, first time seeing the likes of Al Snow and Hardcore Holly on the WrestleMania stage during this run through. And to be fair, I quite enjoyed the match. Thought it was a lot of fun. It was very chaotic, but in a good way. As a hardcore match, you'd expect that to be the case. To be fair. Um, Maybe a little bit of a dud finish, but it was still entertaining for a match. I think my main sort of like issue with it is the fact that it was a bit quick. Would have liked to have seen this go a few more minutes, and I know we speak about that all the time with WrestleMania matches, but this one was, just given the stipulation and like how chaotic it can really be. I think just give it like enough time just to sort of like let it absolutely just go, crazy is probably the best way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, I still enjoyed it for what it was. Like, I don't think it was a bad match in the slightest. I gave it a 7 out of 10 overall. But just generally speaking, like, I think just the match itself was pretty decent. So, Billy Gunn gets to a point in the end where he hits a famouser on Al Snow. That's like onto a chair as well. He goes for the cover, and Holly uses the chair to strike the back of Billy Gunn before then just pinning Al Snow to get the win. So I think after a pretty crazy matchup, it was a little bit of a maybe underwhelming finish, perhaps you could say in the end. But I think despite that, leading up to it, it was pretty fun. So I mean, I always enjoy a hardcore match. You got triple threat rules as well. Falls Count Anywhere, I think, was the stipulation of this one as well. Which is what was brought up on commentary at one point. So yeah, there was a lot going on. It was all outside the ring. There was stuff being shattered everywhere, being broken, weapons being used. There was a whole lot to sort of digest from this one, but it was pretty fun. It was a good way to kick things off at WrestleMania, just sort of like get like a crazy opening contest to get people interested. I think it did the job pretty well. So yeah, 7 out of 10 I think is pretty fair for me personally. I quite enjoyed it. What did you make of this hardcore triple threat?
Oh, my biggest complaints were that the time. You've already hit on that. I think it probably should have been longer, but it is what it is. And then I think you could kind of tell, like, Billy Gunn wasn't. a fan of being in these kind of matches. Just hardcore in general, just wasn't his style, and I think you can kind of feel that he doesn't feel super in place. And then just compared to Al Snow and Hardcore Holly, which is very much their forte. Um, but just that being said, it was just a little too quick. Felt like probably 5 more minutes. And if you count the number of times I've said that between this WrestleMania series, it would probably be shocking. But yeah, I think the hardcore, stipulation obviously gives us these opening and these shocking moments, to help liven up the crowd, who were very, very volatile throughout the night. So I forget how over Al Snow was. Definitely the most over guy in the ring. Crowd absolutely loves him, and just the fact that his head, the catchphrases that came along with it, just the thoughts of that going over in today's WWE is just very much a theme of the Attitude Era. A lot of things they did back then makes you question, what for me personally, I watched as a child. So, not a child, but a middle-aged kid. Some questionable things there. But with that, for the rating, I didn't quite give it as high as you. Yeah, that lack of content kind of felt like it was the biggest downside for me. So I ended up giving it a 5.5 out of 10. Just didn't. I don't really recall anything super memorable, and just felt like it needed 5 more minutes. So with that, getting into the next match, which has Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett defending their world tag team championships, up against Test and D'Lo, and Debra is at the side of Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett. This is Owen's 10th WrestleMania appearance, by the way. KP, what'd you make of this second and first tag team match of WrestleMania 15?
It was okay. I wouldn't say this was a particularly good match, to be honest with you. There was some decent tag team action throughout the matchup, but honestly, it was just really, really short, and it was just okay. It didn't set the world alight in any way, I don't think. Yeah, it didn't really do too much for me. Gets a point in the contest here where Debra gets up onto the apron and subsequently pulled down by Ivory. They start bickering at ringside. Attention gets drawn towards the two of them. And then D'Lo, who's in the ring, has Jeff set up for a move. Looks like he could be transitioning to like a powerbomb or something along those lines. And Owen Hart goes for a missile dropkick from the top rope. And that allows Jeff Jarrett to transition into a jackknife cover in order to get the victory here in this matchup. So whilst this is all happening, Test is too busy on the outside of the ring dealing with the situation between Ivory and Debra. So that results in D'Lo getting up in his face after the contest, and the two sort of like trade blows before they get separated. And this all comes back from, I think it was Saturday Night Heat, just before WrestleMania, and there was a battle royal or something, I think the commentators were saying. So this team was very impromptu. It wasn't like a team that had been teaming together recently, and like they've been sort of like working things out. By the sounds of it, anyway, that's the impression I got. I think you could probably go into a little more detail, Nick, perhaps. But yeah, they did not seem to be on the same page whatsoever. And that translated through the match and post-match. So yeah, they were throwing hands at each other at the end, and even like just before the match began, they were getting in each other's faces, and just the tag team cohesion wasn't there between D'Lo and Test. So yeah, that was quite interesting for sure. I wasn't exactly sure what to make of that, but yeah, as far as Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett are concerned, well, quick little few minutes, defend their titles and get out of there whilst the other team's dealing with all the drama. So yeah, like I say, it was okay. It was fine. It didn't do anything for me so much, but it was an okay match. I gave it a 5.5 out of 10. I don't really think I can really say too much more about it.
Yeah, for the high expectations that we developed over the first 14 WrestleManias in the tag teams, typically being pretty consistent performers, this did not, go with that. Along with Owen Hart's 10th WrestleMania appearance, developed these high expectations for his matches for the most part as well. But this one just wasn't that. It was a bit of a dud. The woman on the outside of the ring causing, the distraction and being more important than the actual match itself really kind of took my attention out of it, and just really couldn't get into the match after that. So it was very much more about that than it was the tag match, and so that drew me away from it. You mentioned the brawl with the impromptu team and D'Lo and Test, and you could kind of feel it. It just wasn't, there wasn't really much to, like, storyline wise. There was something, but match wise, not so much. And I actually give this one a 3 out of 10. So the difference in ratings, and I'm the lower of the two, is are two both very rare things that tend to happen on the push. So interesting to see if that trend will continue. And with that, getting into the next match, this is different for sure. We have Butterbean going up against Bart Gunn in a brawl for all match. KP, what'd you make of this one?
This one's a blink and you'll miss a situation, isn't it, really? Not your typical WrestleMania matchup. This was a boxing match, brawl for all, they're calling it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it going into the matchup, and then about 40 seconds later, it was all over. So, don't know exactly the amount of time, but it was around that sort of area. But I mean, it was a pretty entertaining, minute or so. Butterbean was very dominant. He looked pretty good, to be fair. He did exactly what he was, wanting to achieve out there. Just a very, very, very short, fight, I guess, is what can be said about this one. It ends in a first round knockout. Butterbean, he's very quick at the gates. He knocks down Bart Gunn once, who then gets back up to his feet. And then Bart gets knocked out pretty soon after getting back up again. And that's Butterbean with the victory, and in pretty short fashion. Very dominant, very quick, very easy. He looked pretty impressive. The punches he was throwing were, they were landing very, very nicely. And Bart Gunn got hit with a couple of absolute, shots to the head. It was, there isn't really much else I can add to it because it was so short, and Bart didn't really offer any sort of offense himself. It was just all Butterbean for the minute or whatever it was. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10 just because I did find it quite entertaining for the very short time that it was on for. But what more can I possibly say about it? It was very quick. So yeah, just a quick flyby one. This one.
And in terms of a wrestling match, it didn't exist. So we've kind of gone over this several times about rating these kind of matches where in terms of a wrestling match, either it's very, very hard to rate, and or in this case, I would argue impossible. Typically, I give these kind of matches a 2 out of 10 if there's some sort of context or content. But in this case, it was really not. Butterbean landed 2 punches, and that was that. So a boxing match and a wrestling, card that really doesn't have any wrestling aspects to it. It's just not for me, and I've expressed that several times throughout this WrestleMania already. When we have these kind of matches that aren't really wrestling matches, and the only positive I pulled from it was you got to see those shots, but then they showed that about 35 times to try to sell that. So I'm sure there's a bunch more to the story, and looking into that, there was some personal beef with apparently JR led to Gunn getting knocked out this way. For a 35-second match, and our review takes about 3 times longer than the actual match that took place. In my opinion, it's just not worth getting into. So I gave this one a 1 out of 10, which is my lowest rating of our WrestleMania series so far. Getting into the next match, we have Mankind going up against the Big Show. To the whole purpose of this match is called a referee match, but the whole purpose of it is if the winner of this match will then get to referee the main event of the night, which is Austin and Stone Cold. Austin and The Rock. Seems simple enough, right? Just the winner gets to ref a match. Just you wait. Plenty more on that as the night goes on. KP, what did you make of the actual match itself with Big Show and Mankind here?
Yeah, it was okay. It was very slow. A little bit back and forth. I think the quality was quite lacking in a wrestling match here for me personally. It's not exactly a technical display of brilliance, is it really, from this one? Yeah, it wasn't to my liking, I think it's safe to say. It had a weird vibe to it anyway. And then, being obviously what it was meant to achieve, with the winner going on to referee the main event, it just felt like a little bit of a train wreck. Like, not so much like it was completely god awful, but I just don't think it really flowed at all. It was a little bit just all over the place. Like it, there was a very, very bad sort of like gel and vibe to the matchup, and it just really didn't sort of like capture me in. In terms of how it went down, like it gets to a point where Big Show's using a chair on Mankind at ringside, like just because why not? And I don't think this is the only match of the night that this was deemed okay when it shouldn't have been technically. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. But yeah, he's using a chair on Mankind, and the referee's like, all right, stop. Like, yeah, I get that they're part of the corporation and stuff, and maybe the rules are a little bit lax, but I think even still, like the referee was like, oh, like just stop it. I will disqualify you. And Big Show eventually does stop, I suppose. For a while. But then I guess he throws Mankind back into the ring, and he sets up some chairs in the ring, and then looks to chokeslam Mankind through it. The referee warns him before he does it. He's like, look, stop, don't do this. And yeah, he just does it anyway. Chokeslams Mankind through the two chairs set up in the ring, and then gets DQ'd because of it. So honestly, just what is this? It was tragic. It was really, really poor. I guess the importance of the match, does come into play, but even despite that, it was all a bit of a train wreck in parts. You get Vince McMahon coming down afterwards, and he gets up in the face of Big Show. He's questioning him, saying like, what did you do that for? Like, do you realize what you've done? He actually slaps Big Show across the face at one point, and then Big Show, he's already, by the way, attempted to sort of like threaten to choke slam Vince McMahon at this point, and then he gets slapped in the face, and then he just knocks him down. So, yeah, clearly had enough, and Vince McMahon gets helped backstage, and there's a little bit of a segment there where he actually declares that the cops should be called on Big Show, which happens as a progressing thing throughout the course of the night. So, it was just a weird contest, this one. It didn't vibe with me at all. I gave it a 4 out of 10 because just the lack of the flow, the lack of quality, just generally everything about it was just so sluggish and slow. Yeah, it wasn't for me. It's not my match. Let's put it that way. It's very difficult for me to enjoy this type of thing, and when it was this bad, yeah, I can't really say anything good about it per se. But 4 out of 10, maybe that's generous. I don't know. So far, my ratings compared to yours have seemed very generous, but I'd love to see what you made of this one, Nick.
Well, we were back on the same page. I too gave this one a 4 out of 10. Yeah, just the match itself very slow, and it's kind of just a theme throughout the night, and a kind of where is the logic? I know we often say using logic in wrestling is a dangerous decision, especially during the Attitude Era. But yeah, like you stayed up there in the upper right. Big Show clearly hitting Mankind with the chair, and then there's always that debate: is Mr. Sacco considered a weapon? Just put that out there. You guys can debate that amongst yourself. And then the referee decides to, end the match with that choke slam through the chairs, which I don't think was as clean as they had intended. But regardless, when the after effects of a match, in this case, Vince and Big Show making his WrestleMania debut, by the way, when the after effects of a match are more interesting than the actual match, that's usually a problem. Similar to the tag match earlier in the night. But yeah, Vince getting in Big Show's face, and not a good idea. But who got the better of that? You could argue throughout the night. We'll get into that a bit more, and it's just kind of part of that roller coaster ride that we mentioned towards the beginning of the podcast. But yeah, as for the match itself, yeah, not much really to go on here, and the stipulation being you get to be in a ref match. Should they really care that much? You could argue the one that's not a part of the corporation, that of Mankind, should. But Big Show clearly doesn't care. So why should we? Yeah, so I gave this one a 4 out of 10. Getting into the next match, we have Road Dogg defending his IC title up against Ken Shamrock, Val Venis, and Goldust, who is accompanied by Blue Meanie and Ryan Shamrock, who is quote unquote Ken Shamrock's little sister. Yeah, so mentioned earlier the swap of the belt. So this was originally supposed to be Billy Gunn's spot, which again would have made a lot more sense. Just felt like it would have gelled better. And the type of match here was a 4-corner elimination match. KP, maybe you can shed some more light on what exactly that was supposed to mean. Um, because after watching the match, I'm really still not sure what that type of match was supposed to be. Clearly, it didn't work that well because I don't think I've seen one of these since, and if I have, it's been a very very long time, and clearly didn't work as well as it should because again, stipulation we don't see. So KP, Intercontinental title match, WrestleMania 15. What'd you think of it?
Well, for starters, yeah, very unique dynamic with the stipulation. You mentioned about what exactly did the stipulation mean, and what how exactly did it sort of like get to that point. I've only ever seen these stipulations for tag team matches, so we see sort of like a fatal four-way tag team contest where you've got each member of the teams that are in each corner. So you've got, like, I don't know, say like 4 teams. You got one. You got them all in each corner, and then you got a legal participant. It could be 2 at the same time. Could be all 4 at the same time, and then they obviously have to tag in respectively. So that's generally the more common way we see it in the modern day. Whether they tried this one time and then scrapped it, I don't know the history of this type of stipulation for singles contests. I don't know, but I don't think it works quite as well as the tag team ones do, because essentially you're tagging in another singles competitor. So that's essentially what this comes down to. There are 2 guys legal at all times, and then there are 2 guys who aren't legal, and they all have their own separate corner that they have to tag in from. They're assigned a corner each. So it works for tag matches, in fatal 4-ways and whatever, because naturally tagging is a big part of of tag teams. That just makes sense. But yeah, when it comes to singles, I'd never seen this type of stipulation before in this capacity, so it's quite interesting. Didn't know what to make of it at first, but in terms of how the matchup went down, it had a lot going on. There was a whole lot in this one. It had some drama on the outside. It was a relatively decent paced match. I'll give it that. It was a bit of a double elimination. I've got to be honest, that was a bit meh. But besides that, it wasn't bad, I guess. There have been worse matches on this card so far by quite some way. It gets to a point in the end where, well, I say just leading up towards the end, I suppose I should say. I mentioned a double elimination. Let's talk a bit more about that, because Ken Shamrock and Val Venis, they're brawling up the ramp, and that leads to both men just being counted out and to therefore be eliminated as a result. So it literally didn't even like progressively get to this point. It was essentially like, right, okay, your spot's coming up, go out the ring and just run away. That was essentially how this one played out for the elimination. I thought it was done pretty poorly. There wasn't sort of like a natural progression to get to that stage, and they were accidentally counted out. It was just like, right, you guys are gonna go up there, and now I'm gonna count really quickly, and you guys are gonna get eliminated. So that for me just didn't really work too well. It was done really poorly. Maybe if it was done better, it might have worked a bit better. But I'm not a fan of count out elimination style stuff anyway. So, but yeah, regardless of that, Ken Shamrock, he's very annoyed. He tries to get back into the ring, to be fair to him, and he's eliminated out obviously as a result. But because he just can't quite get back in time, he's very frustrated. So he basically slams Road Dogg and Goldust out of pure frustration, and then just disappears essentially. That's just his sort of like his last little say. Walks up the ramp and he's out of there. Eventually, Road Dogg does get the win and holds on to his Intercontinental Championship. Ryan Shamrock, who you mentioned, aligning with Goldust here. Apparently, she attempts to grab the foot of Road Dogg, although. And Michael Cole, who's on commentary for the first time here on the WrestleMania, he does literally question Ryan's sort of motives here, because Road Dogg is on the other side of the ring. Like, yeah, you could argue that the Irish whip was reversed, but if that's the case, and she really did think that she was going to grab Road Dogg, her reactions are one of the worst you've ever seen in the history of humanity. Because there's a good few seconds, like after the reversal, that she grabs the leg of Goldust. So yeah, once she does that, Goldust is looking at her like, what are you doing? There's a little bit of a confrontation between the two of them, and Goldust tries to take advantage of Road Dogg coming up behind her with a power slam, but Road Dogg reverses it into a cover, and that'll be enough to secure the win and retain the title. So yeah, it was a weird finish. Definitely a little bit bizarre, which is ironic for that of Goldust, I suppose. But yeah, the double elimination was pretty poor. The matchup did have a decent pace to it, like I said, but yeah, there was just a few things up and down here and there. I gave it a 6 out of 10. It was okay. It was fine, and I don't really think that. I just think they missed out on a few things here. It just felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity. It could have been a fun match, I think, but yeah, I don't know. Didn't really work that way.
So getting back into the stipulation bit, yeah, you made a good point. We have seen those in tag matches, but with those, there are twice as many people, and they actually have a motivation to be tagged. Where in this case there is no motivation to be tagged, and I don't think they used any but 2 corners. So technically, I guess call that a 2 corner elimination match. Just make this a fatal 4-way. There's no reason why this stipulation should have been used here. It would have made for a much better match. I can safely support that. So yeah, the count out thing was weird. The Ryan Shamrock accidentally tripping Goldust, and what you mentioned was the slowest reaction time in history, has to be, and that makes you think that's exactly what they were going with, and that was her general intention, because of that reversal. And just, blue meanie dynamic with Ryan was just was kind of funny, but it's really dumb. Yeah, this was all over the place. Not again, when the booking decisions and the drama take away from what should have been a good match, that really seems to be a common theme for the evening. Yeah, so that just distracts us from the actual wrestling, and then now we're halfway through Mania, and it feels like we've barely gotten any actual wrestling because it's all about the drama. So with that, yeah, rating on this one a 5 out of 10, I guess. Feels harsh, but it just feels like this match should have been much better than it actually was, and it was just all about the drama. It doesn't stop here with this next match. We have Kane going up against Triple H. Yeah, KP, what'd you make of this one?
Yeah, more drama. I think that's safe to say. The drama does not sort of end, I guess, throughout the rest of the night. There's always talking points in these matches. And this one definitely has that for sure. It was an okay match between Triple H and Kane. It was very slow throughout, and there was some decent storytelling, I guess you could say. A little bit of twist, a little bit of turn. We have like I said, a slow match, and it progressively just going along that way for the most of it. Bits of back and forth here and there, and eventually we get China coming down, who has been very heavily involved in the build up to this matchup, turning on DX and siding alongside the corporation. She's sort of like she's sort of like aligning herself with Kane here in this particular situation as well. And we have a moment where Kane, he looks to use a steel chair to strike against Triple H. And China stops Kane, convinces him that, she should be the one to attack Triple H instead. So Kane sort of agrees to it, allows her in the ring, gives her the steel chair, and sort of like turns his back to China, sort of like to sort of like try and like deal with Triple H, get him back to his feet or something, set up a chair shot perhaps. And we've seen a lot of wrestling shows before. The classic, someone has a chair, someone turns their back. You think it's going to go one way, it's going the other way. It's exactly what happens here. Yeah, maybe sure it was a bit telegraphed during the matchup, but the crowd seemed to enjoy this moment, I think, to be fair. So there was that. I guess you could say the crowd liked it. So China hits Kane with the steel chair instead of Triple H, and that causes a disqualification. So therefore, Kane wins by DQ. Triple H gets up, hits a pedigree onto Kane on the steel chair. And then him and China basically just celebrate and celebrate their reunited duo here, and then they just head off together. So it was it was interesting. It wasn't a good match, let's put it that way. It was okay at best. It was fine, and there was that little bit of storytelling at the end there, and the chicken at the start as well, the chicken suit. Go back to the previous WrestleMania with the announcer. Absolute brilliant throwback. Don't know why, but I popped for it. I just found it amusing as hell. Was it good? No, but it was funny. So I guess I can give that as a bit of an entertaining little tidbit to start with. But yeah, these matches have a serious way of generating conversation between us and having talking points. So I got to give them that. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Like I say, it was okay. It was fine, but the general vibe of this WrestleMania, these matches don't set the world alight. So yeah, it's okay. It's fine.
The chicken getting Tombstone was just, I think, a little bit of an appetizer. This is something you can expect from this booking, which we know what happened to WCW. This WrestleMania honestly feels like a WCW booked show. The Pete Rose in a chicken costume, as a callback to last year's Mania. Why was he involved again? I think he does have some history in Philly, but just because the hands up, all right, it's a moment, I guess. That's what we're looking for here. Into the actual match, you see the storyline of China going against Triple H, which DX is all the happening right now, going up against the corporation. So they're very much, they're doing bad things, but they are the ones that are being cheered. And so obviously the crowd popped for that, and like you said, telegraphed to hell. But yeah, you could. It was a moment, and the actual match up until this point for me was match of the night. So would take for whatever that's worth. And it did have moments, so I did give it a 6 out of 10. Just yeah, it's again, for taking away from the actual wrestling that we had. We have China coming down. At least we got a bit of wrestling before that, so that was kind of my give me something moment. And this kind of did that. So up until this point, match of the night. So 6 out of 10. There you go. Getting into the next match, which is very much not match of the night, we have Sable defending her WWE Women's Championship up against Tori. KP, how'd you like this one?
I mentioned earlier in the night a match possibly being somewhat described as a train wreck. Well, this is the real thing. This was a very tough watch between Sable and Tori. Yeah, it was awful. It was so bad. There were a lot of errors throughout this one. It was incredibly slow paced. God, this is, it's very difficult to highlight good things from this contest because of just how generally terrible it was. And I don't want to I don't want to sort of think, well, we haven't had that many women's matches at WrestleMania, and I don't really think there's been a standout one. Obviously, you look back at the wrestling era, and women's wrestling wasn't really that sought after back then, which is unfortunate because obviously we look at the modern day and it's very, very different. But this is the fourth singles match in the women, for women on the WrestleMania stage. We're at WrestleMania 15. It's quite crazy that it's only that amount, and I guess by the quality here of the women's champion and the challenger, you can, I guess, kind of see why, which is unfortunate. It's thankfully things have changed a lot to the modern day. But regarding this particular match itself, yeah, not a lot of good to talk about it. The referee gets knocked down at one point. Sable looks to get the win until Tori reverses the Sable bomb and then fights back. As she's fighting back, we do have someone called Nicole Bass coming on in, entering the ring. First time I'd actually heard or known about this person, so I wasn't really too sure of who they were. But when they came on into the ring, the commentators seemed to basically just say exactly who she was and what she was there for. And yeah, she takes out Tori with a gorilla press. Sable then hits the Sable bomb and pins Tori to get the win. I mean, that description there makes it sound kind of decent, right? Doesn't sound too bad. But that's taken out all of the very slow, sluggish, sort of awkward moments throughout it, because this match had a lot of those. There were some botches, there was some just some general lack of communication, and yeah, a lack of quality, I think, is quite evident in this matchup, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 10. This was terrible and hard to watch, and I may be too generous. I can't wait to hear what you gave it, Nick, but this was difficult to watch, wasn't it? I can't imagine you enjoyed this one.
Yeah, lots of awkward moments, I think, is a great description. Not a good match. The shameless sex appeal. But to WWE's defense, they're getting pops of the night. Every time a woman is in the ring or on screen, arguably the loudest pops of the night. So, can you really fault WWE for trying to capitalize on that if it's getting them getting views? Is it from a wrestling standpoint? No. Did it build that huge hole that we've seen now the women of today kind of pick themselves out of? Yes, but it's it's uh it's a topical discussion. I think probably would warrant a separate video entirely to discuss in great detail. But for this moment here, this match here, yeah, not a good match. For someone like Sable to have a finisher of a Sable bomb, being probably maybe 105 pounds, questionable decision there as well. But I guess in this instance, she seemed very shocked to have the assist there, but clearly took advantage of it. And I thought, wait, that can't be Tori Wilson. Can it? Doesn't look like her at all. So I looked into that as well. It's not Tori Wilson. She hasn't debuted for another 2 years. And again, I didn't think it looked like her, but having the name Tori, being in that relative time range, I thought, well, maybe she just looks different. Maybe she got some surgery done or something. I don't know. But no, it is not. It is not Tori Wilson. But yeah, the match itself, not good. It's and we've said this before, but it is sometimes hard to put yourself in that time period and think, well, maybe they thought this was a good wrestling match, because obviously in the first 14 WrestleManias, women are very, very seldomly featured. Luckily, as we both hit on, we do turn that around. But for this moment, this match, WrestleMania 15, far from a good one. Gave this one a 2.5 out of 10. Felt like, yeah, even that felt generous. So we'll swiftly move on to the next match, which has Shane McMahon defending that European Championship up against X-Pac. So again, it's more corporation versus DX here. Corporation is essentially involved throughout the entire night. I think we'll probably get into that most with the main event, but this is just kind of more of the same of what we've seen and more of the same of what we will see. But KP, what'd you make this European title match?
We have a good match at WrestleMania. Finally. It took ages to get to this point, but when I was watching this one, this was a breath of fresh air. I absolutely loved it, purely because it had just an enjoyable vibe to it, right? There was a whole lot going on. It was kind of crazy in parts. It was just a great match. There was so many close moments throughout the entire contest. X-Pac, clutching out a kick out from absolute nowhere on a number of occasions. There was some good storytelling. There was a cool twist towards the end. Yeah, I really liked this one. I thought it was a great match from start to finish. So let's break down a lot of what happened here. So you got X-Pac and Shane McMahon for the European Championship, and X-Pac has it gets to a point eventually where he has Test in the corner. He sat down, and he has been an absolute nuisance to X-Pac all match. He's been, up in his case. He's been interfering. He's been doing this, doing that, and the other, distracting the referees, whatever. And it gets to a point where X-Pac has just had enough, and he finally gets in a position where he can hit him with a Bronco Buster. Shane McMahon's dealt with for a minute. He's fine. He's out of action. And he hits the Bronco Buster. That then sort of promotes, after all this sort of calamity that's gone up until this point, with many, many, many interferences, you even had the Mean Street Posse at some point. They were on the ringside area. They were in the crowd, front row, just sort of like getting involved, as well as all of Test's, shenanigans here and there. You do get Triple H and China coming down, seemingly to help X-Pac, and just to give him some sort of backup after everything he's gone through, the trials, tribulations up until this point. China distracts the referee whilst Triple H pulls Test out of the ring. You think he's going to, take him out or whatever. And instead, Triple H then gets into the ring himself and pedigrees X-Pac. So a bit of a twist, bit of a turn there. before he then drags Shane McMahon onto X-Pac in order to get the victory and have Shane retain his European Championship. But this one was so much fun. Like I said, there were so many obstacles for X-Pac to try and overcome. Like I said, Shane McMahon, Test, Mean Street Posse, then ultimately Triple H and China in the end as well, turning on him. DX Brethren, no longer. Just X-Pac showing incredible amounts of resiliency, kicking out of so many close moments here. It was a really, really fun match to watch. Even post-match, you've got Road Dogg and Billy Gunn coming on down to help X-Pac. They get laid out by Triple H and Test. And then you've got Kane, who comes on down after the matchup earlier on between himself and Triple H. Obviously still not done with him. And he chases off Triple H, China, and Test. They completely get head off. And then you've got the New Age Outlaws helping X-Pac back up to his feet to end the segment, and basically just warning Triple H via the commentary table, just shouting, stuff towards Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole. But it was a really, really fun match. Like, I had a lot of good times watching this one, and generally just enjoyed the pace of it. It was crazy, it was nuts, and it was just a completely different style vibe to everything we've seen up until this point on this WrestleMania, and it was much, much needed at this point of the night. So I had a great time watching it. I thought it was great, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. Just up to this point, easily the match of the night. It's not even close.
So I will agree that it had better wrestling than we've seen. Definitely upper echelon of wrestling that we've seen throughout the night. But the argument that I have for you here is that in terms of something different that we've seen throughout the entire night, this match was so overbooked, and honestly, that took a bit away from the match itself for me. I think had you just let these two guys have the match itself, obviously that would have very much changed the outcome. But in terms of what we got before that, ending bit there from Shane and X-Pac, yeah, it was fun. But just how many people can you involve in a match? I just feel like more of the same throughout this entire WrestleMania. Just overbooked shenanigans that at some point is fun, but not when you see it every single match. Every single match has some sort of shenanigans going on. It's just like, give us a clean match. So at this point, and I don't know, obviously we've had some differences in ratings throughout the night, and I don't know if this is just a matter of this is what I think you mentioned. You didn't get into wrestling until later. I'm sure you know about most of this stuff anyways, just for being a wrestling fan itself. But in terms of like, this is what I grew up with, the chaos that I knew, I'm having remembered it so fondly, and then now having to go back and watch this, it's like, I don't know. It's kind of putting on a bit of a light bulb, and that maybe this wasn't as entertaining as I thought it was back in the day as a child, or a young kid. Some of these things, just off the wall bizarre, and just throwing me for a loop, and knowing what we know now about wrestling, the definition of overbooked. So yeah, the match itself was good, but everything else was just absolute chaos, and the roller coaster ride continues. I gave it a 6 out of 10, which, as much complaining as I've done, it just feels like there's more of the same from what we've seen. Just swerve after swerve throughout the entire night. It is topical, like you said. It does give us a lot of talking points, but it feels like it's more about the drama than it is the wrestling, and unfortunately, that will always get a bit of a step down for me. I think a little goes a long way, and in this case, a ton appears to go a long way as well. So, for whatever that's worth. Getting into the next match. The Undertaker returns to continue his streak with Paul Bearer, back with Paul Bearer, this time going up against Big Boss Man. Considering the circumstances, Undertaker, Big Boss Man inside a Hell in a Cell match, first Hell in a Cell match on WrestleMania. This should be a great match, right, KP? And I cannot wait to hear the post-match happenings here again. Another instance of the match itself paling in comparison to the topical conversation that continues after the match.
Just when you think you've seen it all in a night of, pure chaos, they just decide to go one step extra. I guess at this point, nothing was really a surprise, I suppose. Topical points all the time, like you just mentioned there. Undertaker at WrestleMania. He is a tale of two halves. You know, we know him about having such an iconic streak, and you know, towards the late stages of that, his matches were insane and were unbelievable. And we'll talk about that when we get to those matches. But just these first, what is number 8? I think this was. These first 8 have been, wow, so incredibly poor for the majority, bar a couple, you know, that have been at least decent. Yeah, this one fell back into the dud category for sure. It was so dull. It was a Hell in a Cell match that felt like it was in slow motion for most of it. Like, I've mentioned a couple of times before in the past, if a match went any slower, it'd go backwards. This one probably was going backwards at parts. It was so sluggish and slow, man. It was so boring to watch. Really underwhelming finish as well after a boring contest. Yeah, this one was tough. Big Boss Man and Undertaker. I've spoken highly about them both, you know, on occasions during these WrestleMania run-throughs, and you put them in a Hell in a Cell match together, and you know the biggest talking point is once the match was over, what happened afterwards. Yeah, I mean, you can understand it because what happened afterwards was freaking stupid and crazy, but Hell in a Cell, you should be making moments in there, right? It's a big structure. It's meant to be brutal. It's meant to be engaging with the fans. And was it any of that? Honestly, not really. They tried a bit with handcuffs that fell off Undertaker when Big Boss Man hit him with his nightstick. I don't know if that was meant to happen. It didn't look like the handcuffs were ever in a position to actually hold Undertaker towards the cell. But yeah, besides a little bit of blood from Taker that was shed during the matchup, I don't know. This just felt very basic and poor. Undertaker just hits a tombstone power driver, just standardly, I guess, and that's it. You know, during the matchup, that like there's no sort of build to it. There's no overcoming of anything. It's just eventually, I don't know if the crowd were booing. I really don't know, but the crowd got to a point where they sounded almost restless. And then it almost looked to me like a you know, they just called for the match to end like pretty much straight away because they knew it wasn't working or something. I could be completely misreading that, but that's kind of how it felt to me. And when that sort of took place and they sort of went to the finish right afterwards, I was like, wow, maybe that was actually just sort of like done on the spot. But I don't know. Regardless of the fact, though, the tombstone to get the win, and that was it. We then get the Brood, who sort of appear from the top of the arena and they lower themselves down onto the cell. And they drop down a noose for Undertaker, who then ties it to Bossman as the Brood rise back up. And then Paul Bearer, who is, you know, just away with the mechanics for the Hell in a Cell, he presses the button to raise the cell. And I'm assuming you can figure out what happens next with Bossman. So yeah, I mean, what on earth are we doing? Like, why is this a segment? I mean, it's one way to write someone out, I guess you could say, but besides that, like, this is a bit it's a bit much, don't you think? A little bit. After a pretty poor match, yeah, you talk about that noose segment because I mean I can't believe I'm even saying this, but it is the biggest talking point. Like it's not a good thing by any means necessary. It's extremely yikes. But yeah, the match was freaking awful. It was so bad. I gave it a 4 out of 10 just because it was at least interesting to watch how bad it was, I suppose. And then it's kind of has a talking point. So I don't know. Yeah, I've seen worse matches, I guess. You know, Sable and Tori was way worse on this one. That's saying something. But yeah, 4 out of 10. Just oh my god, it was rough, and it was tough to watch, and it wasn't great, and it was very boring. Nick, what'd you make of it?
Yeah, like I said, the two guys in the ring in a Hell in a Cell match, this new interesting structure. Um, they should have done a lot more. And I did hear the crowd noise that you're referring to. I kind of thought maybe that was booze, but then it didn't sound like direct. Maybe the crowd noise was tampered with. I don't know, but it didn't sound happy. I'll say that. Um, Yeah, I think we need to start a streak for WrestleMania 16. We need to, well, start a record of our own with WrestleMania streak, and that is Undertaker's good and bad matches. To my count, I think this is his fifth or sixth, if depending how generous we're feeling, sixth dud of his 8 wins. So by my calculations, and we'll have a better look at that before WrestleMania 16. But to my calculation, he's 2-6 in terms of having good matches and having bad matches at WrestleMania. This one, as you said, absolutely another dud to be put in the bucket. Kind of makes you, don't get me wrong, the streak is impressive regardless. Um, but it does kind of take away some of that fire. Um, Luckily, maybe not for him, but he does end up missing the next WrestleMania, which is WrestleMania 16. Um, and this is the second time he's missed WrestleMania. He also missed one in 1994. That was WrestleMania 5 due to injury. So maybe this next break coming at a good time, and he'll come back, and the matches he puts on are much better. Maybe he kind of uses that time off to kind of figure out what makes a good match and what doesn't, because clearly he's been on the wrong side of that. Uh, yeah, 4 out of 10 for me for the actual rating, and even just kind of going through it again in my head, it just feels like maybe that's even a bit high. But then, yeah, the noose being dropped, the scene, Big Boss Man hanging from it. Whew, that's yeah, it's WWE at this point in the Attitude Era, just like what could we possibly do to get a reaction? And to be fair, this did just that. This did get a reaction from I cannot imagine the news outlet during this time, and seeing that just seen. Um, yeah, this is as soon as the brood comes down and lands on the top of the cell, it was like this core memory of mine that had been stowed away in back in the very back of the file room in my head. And as soon as the brood landed on the file cab or the Hell in a Cell, it clicked, and I said, "Oh no, this is that scene, isn't it?" And then it all came back to me, it all came rushing back, and clearly I was trying to forget this, but alas, this is an unforgettable scene, for better or worse, an infamous scene, if you will, and yeah, this is this is just WrestleMania 15 for you so far. With that, let's go ahead and get into the main event. Stone Cold Steve Austin going up against The Rock, defending his WWE Championship. Like we've said quite often here, this entire Mania up until this point is just pure chaos. And essentially, the storyline throughout the night was who is going to be the referee, because obviously Vince wants it to be someone from the corporation to make sure that the title and The Rock part of stays with the corporation. Um, and I think during the actual match, we had 5 refs. And then Mankind ends up coming back. I'll let you hit on that, tell that story a bit more. But the number of matches or the number of referees we go through here. At this point, Big Show was taken off to jail. Vince announced that he was going to be the ref. Shawn comes in before the match and says, "No, you can't do that." So just brings down a regular ref. So all that hoopla to then have a regular ref throughout the most of the match. It's absolute chaos. Again, I guess you want to call it a talking point. Go for it. But KP, what you make of this match? An absolute chaotic ending to WrestleMania 15.
Yeah, this is a very chaotic main event, and it's one of the few highlights of WrestleMania 15. That's for sure. You glossed over it already. Vince McMahon, appointing himself as the referee and coming down to the ring, ready to ref the match. We got Shawn Michaels coming down, who is the commissioner at the time here of WWF, and he basically says to Vince, there's only one man that can appoint an official for WrestleMania, and that person isn't you. He basically just, uses the crowd to help him out here, and he basically says, there is one person that can, and the crowd are saying it. It's the Heartbreak Kid. It's me, Shawn Michaels, and he then basically tells Vince to get to the back, to hightail out of there, and just to let Shawn Michaels have an official of his own. I think he chooses Mike Chioda as his official here for this one. So, like you said, standard referee. The matchup then takes place, and as you said, throughout the contest, we do get a variety of referees. I think there are 3 standard ones. We've also got a little bit of Mankind coming back in, like you mentioned. And this is a Mankind who had been taken to apparently the hospital earlier on in the night, and had found his way back somehow, and very plausible situation there. But he would get back into the contest. He'd officiate the remaining few moments of the contest, and when Mankind would come back down, this would see Vince in the ring at the same time, and this is a no disqualifications match, so anything can happen. So Vince is helping The Rock basically just take out Stone Cold at this point. Mankind comes down unexpectedly, and he attacks and throws Vince McMahon to ringside before Stone Cold gets back up to his feet and brings the fight back to The Rock. They have a little bit of back and forth, and it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that situation. He ends up hitting a stunner on The Rock to get the victory and to win the title in the end. But it's a really crazy, chaotic main event. It was a fun match, really entertaining, whilst being very back and forth, throughout the entirety of the matchup. Rock and Stone Cold having various parts of dominance throughout, and we even saw a rock bottom from the Rock to one of the referees out of pure frustration of not getting the pinfall over Stone Cold. I thought eventually at one point it was going to be the same for Stone Cold, but he didn't actually stun a referee, so there was at least one ref that was standing here at the end of the contest. That was a generic ref, not one. That was a Mankind style situation. But yeah, really, really close moments throughout. There was some beautiful late kickouts, during this one from both men. I think especially Stone Cold had one, which was really, really close. Loads and loads of drama, and a very annoyed Vince McMahon, especially after the matchup when Stone Cold is declared the winner. We get Vince telling Stone Cold that the title is actually his. Before then, Stone Cold throws him in the ring and hits him with a stunner before then celebrating again. So, yeah, it was there's a whole lot going on in this one. I want to say roughly from start to finish is about 25 minutes or so. So they had a good amount of time here just to tell the story and to get everything out there. But yeah, it was fun. I really liked it. I think as far as the match of the night goes, this is the one. I give it a 9 out of 10. Like I said, I spoke very highly of the X-Pac and Shane one earlier on, but this one just had a whole lot more to it as well. It felt like that big fight feel, as well as having just pure chaos and craziness throughout it. Like you said, Corporation being involved all night, and there were definitely a big influence during this main event too. But Stone Cold coming out on in the end as the winner just made for a really good and awesome moment. So yeah, I really liked it. 9 out of 10 is pretty solid, great main event, and couldn't keep your eyes off of it. It just had a bit of everything.
Yeah, it was a fun match, and that the actual in-ring stuff was good, albeit extremely overbooked. But at this point in the night, that's what we expect. It's what we are thinking. You could argue that comparatively speaking, this was one of the less shocking matches, which, considering what happened, is pretty insane at that. And interesting, just because you hit on the time there a bit, this was the longest match of the night. But interesting bit before this match, the only other match that was in double digits, so 10 minutes or longer, was the Kane Triple H match. Every other match was less than 10 minutes. So just crazy, and kind of. Obviously, we hit on a point of that a couple of times where it just felt like, oh, this match needed a few more minutes. Well, that's because most of the matches were quite short in the grand scheme of things. And then you couple those short matches with all of the booking decisions, the swerves, the turns, the twists, all of that. You kind of book those all together, and it makes sense why some of the ratings are what they are. So, with all that, this match was entertaining. Definitely the best match of the night for me as well. But yeah, just absolute chaos. The after celebration, definitely the highlight of the night for me, and Vince's expressions, and then getting stunnered. And we've probably seen that stunner many times in our lives, but just one of the worst selling at stunner as well. And then being Stone Cold celebrating with the Steve Weisers afterwards was just a great moment, and you could tell it was just always going to be an iconic moment. Just, celebrating with Earl Hebner there. He was having a great time with it as well. Austin posing with Mankind and the boot on Vince McMahon was just an icing on the cake, and it finally felt like the good guys finally got one over on Vince with the help of HBK as well. All the referees, getting escorted out to finally get Mankind in there. Definitely overbooked, but a lot of fun, and definitely one of the better best matches of the night for me. Definitely one of the better matches. That actually felt like we got some good wrestling in there as well. So snuck that in there, if you will. But yeah, I think I hit my rating already. But just in case I didn't, I give it an 8 out of 10. That is WrestleMania 15 done here. KP, hit us with your overall kind of final thoughts on WrestleMania 15, and of course that overall rating, and we'll get this one wrapped up.
Oh, I think out of all the WrestleManias so far, this one goes down as probably having the most talking points. I think that's safe to say. There was a whole lot going on from start to finish. Good, bad, ugly, all this sort of like bits in between. It certainly generates a lot of conversation, and I think you could safely say that it is probably the WrestleMania for talking about this, that, and the other. Highlights for me personally being the main event, and obviously Stone Cold, The Rock, with the whole Vince McMahon stuff. X-Pac and Shane McMahon, I found that to be very, very entertaining and fun. But besides that, just a lot of drip-drab bits here and there. A decent hardcore match to kick things off. But between that, the various things that sort of like were underwhelming, didn't really live up to anything, and unfortunately just didn't hit the bar that I would have liked to have seen them hit. So yeah, a bit of a shame. Overall rating for this one came out as an average of 5.5 out of 10. So I think that is on the lower of my my ratings so far out of these shows. I'm assuming yours will be a little lower than that as well. So I'm interested to see how low yours does get to. I'm thinking probably around the 5 mark, maybe even a little lower it might have been. But besides that though, 5.5 is down with the bottom of the barrel here for these WrestleManias. But like I said, it had a couple of good moments for me, but just generally speaking, poor quality throughout, which is a shame. So yeah, probably won't be going back to watch most of this anytime soon, except possibly maybe the main event, and just if I want to see that crazy European title match. But Nick, your thoughts, WrestleMania 15 overall, how bad was it for you?
Yeah, we've kind of hit on it a couple times. Definitely, I did not enjoy this one. It just I don't know why I enjoyed it significantly less than you did, but maybe it was just a reality check to what I thought was the greatest era. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. Reading through my notes, kind of preparing for this video and stuff, I struggled to keep everything straight, and I just watched the damn show. There's so many twists and turns, and I think definition of overbooked this WrestleMania is absolutely just that. And for me, looking back to like WrestleMania 1 through 9, there were lots of bad manias, and so having just watched those not that long ago, I would argue this is just as bad, just in a different way. There it was more about the drama. There were just tons of just twists and turns. It just, I guess, made sense, but were they needed? Did we need 35 plot twists throughout the night? No, I would have taken half of those in some better, longer wrestling matches. But yeah, if you insist on watching this WrestleMania, I would say stick to the main event. And as you said, maybe the European title, just to kind of get a bit of a taste of what this entire WrestleMania feels like. But I think the main event just does a well enough job of that alone. But outside of that, I think this is a pretty big dud of a WrestleMania. I would argue it's as bad as the two worst, which in my head are WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 9. I put this one right there with it. Just crazy booking decisions that just felt like they were unnecessary, just constant chaos, and again, like I said earlier, if it's done to a point, it's okay, it's entertaining. But if it's done throughout the entire evening, it just gets a bit annoying, at least to me. So that's my take there. I think maybe the Attitude Era, if this is what the entire part of it was, maybe it wasn't as good as I recall. Nostalgia is a powerful drug after all. But yeah, as you said, tons of talking points. Definitely, probably the most talking points through a WrestleMania, clearly by our longer video here. So, yeah, with that, that is WrestleMania 15 in the books, coming off of WrestleMania 14, who I think we both agreed was probably one of the better, if not best, WrestleMania we've seen so far throughout the series. So, very interested to see what WrestleMania 16 brings us, and obviously 17 is often dubbed as one of the best of all time. So, curious to see what the next couple of manias bring us if we're still in this chaotic Attitude Era. Perhaps more of the same, or perhaps a better mix of wrestling and drama. We'll have to wait and see. But with that, this has been the push with Nick and KP, and this has been our latest episode of our WrestleMania review series, where we're going through every single WrestleMania. If you like what we put out here, please let us know in the comments below. Or if you disagree, also, we're here for constructive criticism. So, but yeah, with that, if you have anything to tell us, please let us know. Otherwise, we appreciate those likes and subscriptions as well. Those help us out tremendously. But until next time, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. We'll see you soon. Take care.